soon.
Okay. Let me just check on Facebook and see.
Okay.
Oh, it's live. It's live.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, cool. Welcome everyone. I guess some people are already in here watching us try to figure this out. Technology, right? Rashida, are you online?
Yes, I am. Can you see me? Frank, is the camera on?
Yeah.
Fantastic. Hello, everyone. Welcome.
No.
Welcome to our Uganda Creative Hustle with the fabulous UPPA. My name is Rashida Nalumoso. I'm the arts manager here in Kampala. We've just had a few tech issues, but we are live on British Council Uganda Facebook page. Welcome everybody. Please do share your questions, comments, invite your friends, do watch us, and we're really happy to have your time and ears for the next hour for a creative hustle in partnership with the UPPA. British Council Creative Hustles are delivered in partnership with the range of partners that we work across, from artists to art organizations, professionals, collectives and hubs. We're really interested in bringing creative communities together in what is a really difficult time during the COVID lockdown as a way to find a space online to share conversations about how the art sector is doing and how professionals are able to navigate this really tumultuous time of change. With our partners, we seek to stimulate new ways to connect artists and understanding through each other and the arts as we create international connections and opportunities for those working in the creative sector. Today's Creative Hustle with UPPA shines a spotlight on the work East African photographers are doing to create an image of East Africa. That's been our topic focus and has been prompted by a conversation, particularly in light of Black Lives Matter and looking at this moment of anti-racism and how we really need to pay attention to not only who is behind the camera, but who is in front of the camera, and how do we as creatives and artists navigate that conversation in space as professionals who are responsible for navigating that change. So I'm really delighted to be here in conversation with the UPPA and a range of fantastic East African photographers to have such an important dialogue. I'm going to hand over now to Stella with the Uganda Press Photo Awards, who will also be introducing our speakers today.
Thank you very much, Rashida. And I would like to take this opportunity to add a little bit about the topic that we are going to be having. So for a couple of years in the past, there's been a lot of talk about having native voices documenting and showcasing native stories, and that talk has kind of been amplified with Black Lives Matter and who is reporting the protests that are happening in America. So we figured we might as well just bring the conversation to us at home as well and make it relevant to us. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce some of the people who are going to be joining us to talk about how we can basically use this opportunity to see how we can propel East African voices. First, we'll have Maheda Tadase. Hi, Maheda.
Hi.
Hi, how are you? Maybe you can tell us a little bit about yourself and what your work is all about. Maheda?
Hi, can you hear us? Yes,
I can hear you now. And so if you can tell us a little bit, we have a little showcase of your work, and just tell us a little bit about yourself and the work that you do and where you're best mostly.
Okay, my full name is Maheda Haile Selassie. I am an Ethiopian photographer based in Addis Ababa, and I'm also the founder of Center for Photography in Ethiopia, which is a training and a discussion platform for emerging Ethiopian photographers. So,
and then just let's have a scroll through. And what about this work, this particular work? What was it all about here? You can tell us a little bit.
This is my personal project titled Home Walls. So for a few years, I was photographing walls in Ethiopia, in different parts of Ethiopia, and in public and in private places as a means of portraying the identity of owners.
Okay, fantastic. We're going to move on to Jacques. Hi, Jacques.
Right.
Hi, how are you? Jacques is coming in from Rwanda. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about what you're all about, Jacques.
Yeah, my name's Jacques Nzingabo. I'm a photographer and the founder of Kigali Center for Photography, which is a space that is dedicated to photography education in Rwanda, supporting all generations that are interested in photography. And my work you see on the screen is a long-term project. It's been almost 9 years now that I've been documenting the different parts of Rwanda, trying to show the different image of what Rwanda looks like from my side as a Rwandan. Yeah, so I'm trying to bring this image that I feel like it represents who I am as a Rwandan and in this present time. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Jacques. We'll also be having Barbara Munishi coming in from Kenya. Hi, Barbara.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good. So just give us a little bit about yourself and as we go through some of the work that you've done.
Hi, I'm Barbara. I was born and raised in Nairobi, Kenya. I've been practicing photography for more than 16 years. I call myself a creative practitioner because I'm interested in photo, film, and art. My journey with photography was one of those ones where I just came across it. And for me, it was where I found my voice, where I found that I had the power to connect to people, places, and products. And so far, I love how I have been creating through photography, how I've been connecting to photography, how I've been able to learn myself and my world. And the beauty of photography, which I really, really like, is that every day you always begin to be. And it's just a wonderful journey. And I'm glad to be with everyone here and to share our collective stories.
Thank you so much for joining us. Anna, is there more of that? Yeah. So we'll move on to Edward. Hi, Edward. How are you? Edward is representing Uganda now. Edward, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Hi, everyone, and welcome to this conversation. My name is Edward Echwalu. I'm a Ugandan, born in Soroti, and currently living and working in Kampala. A photojournalist by profession. I've done it for about 10, 13 years now this year. And generally, my first journey in photography came through basic inspiration from the photographs that my mom and dad used to hang on the wall, and I could see just power, just inspiration from admiring the frames on the wall, and thought about, not really so deeply, but thought one day I could be them on the wall. And then on the other side, today here I am documenting stories about lives, stories about things that mean, that have meanings to people and in all diverse ways. And so I look forward to having this conversation with you, and I hope we'll have a very productive one.
Thank you so much, Edward. Thank you all of you guys for joining us. I'm not sure if I introduced myself to begin with. Sometimes I forget. My name is Stella Nantongo. I'm the program coordinator for the Uganda Press Photo Award. And the reason we're having this conversation is to basically see how we can capitalize on the new work, on the new world to kind of propel East African voices. So first I'm going to start by asking Mahda, because she wrote a very interesting blog about imagery and how to represent the native voice, our voices here, our local voices. So Mahda, maybe you can tell us a little bit about that blog and what actually brought on the idea to write about it.
Yes, so I wrote my blog while trying to brainstorm on this idea that's been bugging me for a while. I was questioning the direction part of the industry, the photography industry is taking at the moment in an attempt to divert from these stereotypical images, you know, and the oversimplified narratives that this diversion resulted. For example, you know, takes the beautiful or this ancient narrative of Ethiopia or the hungry or the starving Ethiopia that we know on media. It's the fact that we cannot be done. Sorry, Stella, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, it's good. Yeah, so I was just saying this oversimplified narratives of Ethiopia and the fact that we cannot be more complex than a single narrative. So on my blog, I was trying to stress on the importance of finding a way to build a complex narrative, but also questioning the path we're taking as photographers as well.
Now, that is actually an important question that we have and many people have been struggling with, how to basically, sorry, let me first remove, hold on. How to basically showcase the truth on the ground without falling into the stereotypical narrative. How do you kind of navigate that line? While you were asking yourself, did you kind of find ways to actually stay true to the story without, you know, falling into the trap? Mahda?
Sorry, it was cutting off a little bit there. Can you repeat that question?
No. Yeah, I was asking, how have you found in documenting the stories that you're documenting? How do you find, how have you been able to kind of navigate that thin line between producing what is on the ground and not falling into the stereotypical narrative that we are used to? Because especially many emerging photographers kind of fall into that trap.
Yeah, that's actually a very good question. So for me, when we are talking about stereotypes or these biases, we're not just talking about race or white photographers having a colonial gaze towards Africa, although that's where the majority of the problems happen. So for example, an African American or an African diaspora who is visiting Africa for the first time might have a certain bias or a sense of entitlement toward this creating images in Africa. And similarly, as you mentioned, someone, for example, who's born and raised in Nairobi or here in Addis Ababa, for example, may have a certain bias toward this, the culture or, you know, the people living at the countryside, right? So for me, it doesn't mean that just because you're Black or you've lived in Africa for a decade or so, you are free of bias. So personally, what helped me the most is reading and researching on these issues before diving into especially a sensitive work and a sensitive story. And of course, there is this saying actually by Maya Angelou. She once said, "When you know better, you do better." So I think that works in so many different spectrums along the photography industry. And what I usually try to do is stay humble, try to learn and understand, look at these different historical perspectives and understand more about issues like colonial propaganda, you know, colonial imagery, issues like poverty, porn, representation, yeah, and stay true for my own intentions as well.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Maida. Just to kind of expound on that a little bit, Edward, I'm going to direct this towards you. As a photojournalist, you've seen some of, and you've been reporting actively, sometimes on the front lines. You've seen some of the images that have been propagated over and over again in the media. And we have like emerging photographers who are coming out there, and they've also been saying the same thing, you know, the kind of images, and they think that this is the way to kind of make it by showcasing the, you know, the same kind of imagery. How do you advise, especially the young ones, you know, who are just coming in, how to rein that in, how to create their own voices, or even just to kind of think outside of what the status quo is on what images to actually put out there?
I always like to start with an example of starting it from home. When you approach a subject, when you approach a certain topic and how to present it out, think about your father, think about your mother, think about your sister, think about those closest to you. If a particular image would make you uncomfortable, would make it uncomfortable for you to photograph, say, or showcase your mother in a certain way, then it should be definitely uncomfortable for anyone who would view that picture as well. So for me, I start from a very conscious mindset in the way that what is good for me should indeed be good for a lot of other people. And it starts from family, because why family? Family is so important to us because it has our closest social relationships. And so we tend to protect it the most whenever we try and document stories out there. And so the same way you jealously try and protect those closest to you, it could be a child, it could be your sister, it could be your father or mother, is the same way you need to approach some of the stories and subjects that you photograph out there. And that's the beginning of changing changing the outlook, changing the narrative, changing the way we present ourselves, not just as East Africans, but as a continent as a whole. And so that's usually my simple way of approaching how to showcase such narrative. And it's important because if you can't be as human as possible when documenting such subjects, it becomes extremely difficult to have a more fair perspective, one where you're really closest to the subject and you think that's the kind of narrative you want to show. And so any young photographer would always ask them to take a step back and think about those closest to them. If that image would indeed go out and they feel comfortable with it, in case you feel comfortable with it, in case the sister feels comfortable with it. And I think that's a worthy picture, a worthy narrative to go with.
Barbara, is this something that you also think about when you, I know you do a lot more commercial, editorial and fashion work. Do you ever factor in the thought process on what it is that you're putting out there for people to receive?
All right, just a slight correction. My fashion work is popular, but I also do a whole range of work, including social justice and documentary projects. Oh, and for me, just like what Edward said, integrity, responsibility, sensitivity, and ethics are utmost of importance. As a photographer, one of the things that really helped me in my journey was when I had the photo idea or a project I was going through, or even any commission, I needed to look within myself and also look at what are the underlying themes within this and also within me. What is the idea of the story when I communicate that the audience will go out with? And it all ties into the ethics, integrity, and responsibility that also Edward has really covered through. And sometimes you're in some situations, like I'm taking, for example, the picture behind you, where it seems like, where was that?
This is actually the image that won our Uganda Press Photo Award 2017, I believe. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So in a situation like that, the
2018 actually, sorry.
The photographer knows their duty and the role, why they're there. Because, you know, there's this function of photography. You could be there because of surveillance. You could be there because of agenda setting. You could be there because of cultural transmission. Everything just falls in line with you showing up with responsibility and integrity and knowing the code of conduct and the ethics and the laws of the whole working system, the whole ecosystem where you're working around.
Yeah. While we are still talking about the actual creating of the image, how, Jack, I'm going to put this towards you. How do you think we can work to ensure that we actually encourage more diverse voices and also diversity in the stories that we do tell? Especially as organizations like ours, you know, like the Uganda Press Photo Award, or even the work that you're doing at the Kigali Center of Photography. What can we do to kind of encourage that?
Yeah, I think I will talk about something I call platforms. Platforms, especially when it comes to organizations like UPPA or Kigali Center. What we're doing, we're giving education, which includes everything we're mentioning right now, and ethics, but and also how are we using those platforms? How are we using the guidelines with and also those platforms for the photographers that we are putting into those platforms? When I say platforms, this includes also like last year.
Jack, could you repeat that a bit? I
what
think
kind
you.
Of work we show?
Jack.
Yeah.
Sorry, I think you broke off for a bit. Can you repeat the last minute or so?
Okay. Yeah, I was talking about platforms, and let's say, for example, last year we hosted a photography festival, which also the question comes like, what kind of work are you showing? You know, and who are the photographers? Are there, you know, what kind of work do you want to show, how the audience will also receive, which will also, to me, everything we talk about at the end will also include also policies, and also how do we shoot out there, you know, how do we deal with the government, all of this. So as institutions, I think these are like the key points we have areas to focus on, then also giving those skills from how to use a camera and how to practice with the photography. I think with institutions, we have so much to deal with, especially within our region. Yeah.
Yeah. So actively talking about Kigali Center of Photography, what have you guys actively been doing? For example, in Uganda, we have a kind of gender gap when it comes to, especially with photography and photographers as a whole. And basically to encourage women to come into into photography and encourage them to show their voices more, because again, very many people think that this is a very male-dominated world. So what actively is the Center for Photography in Kigali doing to balance that?
Yeah, that's something we also experienced in the past 3 years. We've been active as a center here. We saw that most of the programs and the exhibitions we had a lack of women. So before the lockdown, we had already a program. We set it up, and we had a co-application. A program was called Women's Eye, which will still be active after. Yeah. we're under lockdown, so we don't know when. But so that's something we saw, and Women's Eye was mostly focusing on the education, but also assistance for those who are interested in photography. And that's still the platform I'm talking about. We wanted to build it. We have so many programs that are more like focusing on educating, and then also encouraging photographers, and then also those who are interested in photography. But also we had a less number of women. That's why we had this particular program that is focusing on the girls and women that are really interested in photography. This was like one of the solutions that we saw that could also help, but also it came with who is going to assist. That's why the question, do we have to engage only women into a program? Does it really make a sense? Is it the way, is that the way you encourage? So then everything always comes with the questions, you know? Yeah, but that's how the center has been trying to deal with that question. But also it comes to what photographers are photographing.
Yeah. Nada,
Yes.
as a, you founded the Center for Photography in Ethiopia. How are you tackling that problem? Or is this a bit different in Ethiopia? How is the landscape over there?
So with CPE, what we've been trying to do is to try and include women in every step of the way. We have had mentorship programs, workshops, exhibitions, and different activities over the past 2-3 years. So we've been putting in a conscious effort to include women photographers. But I wouldn't say that it's very satisfactory, because it's not just, we have a lot of problems, reaching out to different, for example, at the moment, we are only based in Addis Ababa, although it's a Center for Photography in Ethiopia, because we have a limited resource. We are also spreading out these open calls online only. We don't really have much that base to different cities, out whoever is in photography. So yeah, we trained a little bit, but nevertheless, we are still trying to include all women, as well as emerging photographers from different classes or areas.
Yeah, thank you. Now, again, talking about the diversity question, and now I'm going to kind of focus on actually telling of the stories, diverse kind of stories. Edward, you've done a bit of work documenting minorities. In your experience, how has it been like, or what should people kind of focus on when you are looking at how to actually go about doing that with dignity, and and also to do it in a way, because our societies sometimes are very kind of have tunnel vision on what is acceptable. So how do you navigate that to create a nice, cohesive, and well-rounded story?
Yeah, when you talk about minority goes hand in hand with exclusion. And where there's exclusion, and in the case of minorities, definitely there comes in anger, there comes in frustration, there comes in misjudgments, harsh treatments, mistrust, and so on. And from my experience covering, documenting the LGBTI community in Uganda, these individuals, from my own observation, have been harshly misunderstood in the past, and also harshly judged up to date, and from across all platforms, culturally, politically, and even legally. And I can relate the experiences with the current global wave of frustration against about racial injustice, racial discrimination and social justice. And these people just want access to equal opportunities, really, and to be honestly listened to, like the rest of us want to be heard on the range of issues, really, both political and social. And how do we tackle this, the issue of documenting minorities? It's quite, in our community, it's quite hard because minorities are most of the times not understood and, like I said, misjudged in a way. But as from the background of a journalist, I would recommend always the safest steps in documenting and trying to cover issue of minorities is to just follow the core principles of journalism. And among those, truth, really. Journalists can always never guarantee truth, but I think getting the facts right, especially when talking about the issue of minorities, is of absolute importance. And once these communities know that indeed you might not agree with their point of view, but you're reporting facts, their voices, as and when and how they say them, I think you get to earn their trust, and that also better gives you a platform to tell more and more stories going forward. As journalists, you must also be a bit independent, not just a bit, but independent. They must know you to be not affiliated formally or informally to maybe any cultural groups, corporate groups that might harm them, any political groups that might harm them. So you try to be as independent as possible, just so that they can know that we can depend on this voice to air out our grievances, air out our issues. And thirdly, the issue of fairness and impartiality. In case you integrate this into your everyday approach to your subjects while photographing, I think you stand a fair chance of being accepted. And once you're accepted in such a community, you have an open space to document as much as you can possibly cover. And so important as well when dealing with issues of minorities is, from my own experience, it's just humanity, just being aware of the repercussions of what you might photograph or publish, because this could hurt somebody. It could have a negative impact onto somebody for a lifetime. And so you must always weigh as much as possible the impact of your frame, the impact of your picture to a particular subject that you're covering. Mm-hmm. If you have, and the key is usually to understand that these are real people facing real situations and in real time. So please be as human as possible. And if you're being as human as possible, you're able to relate to what they feel in them. And that in a way helps you navigate as well, give you a fair balance of how you present such people in those storytelling. And accountability. All of us must be accountable to each other in whatever you do. And as journalists, especially, speaking as a journalist, you must hold yourself accountable. We definitely all make mistakes. You've seen media houses apologize for erring on stories, from captions, on publishing wrong pictures, pictures without context. I think it's so important on an individual basis. If you make an error, you must be able to accept that you did make an error. Just let it be known to these people that you're human after all, and you strive to make better. And by apologizing, you're actually trying to make yourself better. And obviously, not respect for diversity. We work in a very diverse communities and countries and so on, with different people with different ideologies. You must always respect the diversity that is within us. And the start of that is really, it's also an education, which goes to my next point. Give room for knowledge, I come from a very conservative family and a society, having grown up, educated in a very conservative society, Catholic school, going through Catholic schools for most of my school life. that shapes your life. Imagine 15, 20 years of a school that teaches a certain perspective in your life. It changes how you approach things in life. And I can't lie to you. For example, the issue of LGBT, I was extremely negative, very negative and biased towards it, because all my thought processes have been shaped for so many years. But the bit about education, the bit about growing up is you get to have an independent mindset where you make judgments based on what you've learned and what you've learned over the years. And for me, that has been probably one of the most important aspects in terms of approaching this group and gaining the trust and knowing that I don't know everything. And these people can educate me on just about anything. And that also helps the way that you approach telling their stories from a very informed point of view. If you're allowed to be educated, then you'll have a wealth of information that you can integrate into your pictures.
Yeah. Still, now I want to ask, how do you, again, living in this very conservative society that we live in, how do you navigate where you kind of put your story to be received? Because most of the time we see all these stories made or documented about, especially for LGBTQs, and where do you find an audience for it for home? Because ultimately it starts from home. I've seen them documented like on The Guardian, you know, which is okay, but for most of the time we want to start the change at home. How do you go about finding a place to actually showcase that locally? I think, Edward, you can take this on, and I would like to get insight into from some of the others as well.
Locally, it's been extremely difficult, I must admit, to publish these images because the idea of protecting your sources as well, protecting the subject photograph, it's been extremely difficult. And most of these people, as you might all, if you know, most of the people being lesbian in Uganda, and so you stand a risk of going for several years in jail. You stand a risk of a long time jailment, and so I take that into consideration as well. But on the other hand, I must also go very consciously in terms of how do I publish these pictures. I haven't been able to publish these pictures locally out of fear of safety for these people, because they still live amongst these very communities, the very people who might consume the pictures that I publish. But I've published out of the country and so on. But the point is, just because you don't have platforms right now to publish doesn't mean you stop documenting your story. There is a time and a place where these images will still create the same impact as they would have created now. And even publishing them out of the country, outside of our borders, is a platform that putting more pressure on our leaders to hear the voices of this. And so sometimes it actually makes sense to publish it outside our borders, so that leaders within are pressured to act on the rights and the voices of this. And so there will be a time when I definitely will be able to publish them within the country, but of now, I haven't been able to, and I will not, just because I would like to protect these people, because I earn their trust, and that's how it should be. For as long as possible, I'll always produce this. Even if I publish them after 50 years, it will be one.
Yeah, okay. I'm going to ask Jack. Jack, how have you found, or how would you advise someone to navigate the idea of selling their stories outside of we are most of the time selling within East Africa, but how would you advise someone to sell outside? How would you advise someone to go about that, building their stories to wider audiences?
Yeah, I think this comes with how do you put yourself out there, and which audience do you want to reach. Mostly work with editors that refund my work from my website or published news. What we always suggest, especially photographers here, is always like to find your voice and find your audience. Finding your audience redirects you to exactly who do you want to share the stories with and who do you want to reach further. Adding to what Edward said, it's very hard to publish locally for probably safety of the people you're photographing, or maybe for your safety. I'll speak from my experience from Burundi, like 6 years ago. Had an experience there, and when I came back, I created images, a photo project, but I presented this work only in Bamako and Munich, and nowhere else it can be seen, for my safety. But when it comes to how I reach or how you should reach maybe the audience out of where you are, maybe your region or your country, it always comes with, for sure, I always follow Edward on following him on social media and making sure he updates his websites, which projects he's working on. And also I follow, so I stalk a lot African photographers, because I have those, like, I really love their work and the way they drive. I always learn how do they approach their audience, how do they work with these editors. If you get this opportunity, how do you also portray the people community? Which comes again to what he said, how would you photograph your mother? That area comes to here, and also it comes to when I'm sharing my knowledge or my skills, my experience with my students, is areas like, what do I want exactly them to, to know from me? How do they want? Because most of them comes to you because they see your drive, how you drive, and that's what they want to know. They don't really want to know exactly at the aperture which lens to use. Yes, of course it helps them, but it's not really enough. But coming back to the reaching the audience higher, to me is areas like, how do you find your audience and where do you drive yourself, which includes like having a website, updating your social media, being in contact with the editors you have worked with. All of these really like matters to me, and that's what I could really say.
Yeah, thank you, Jack. Barbara, is there something you might want to add to this? Because I think you've been more successful than, very successful in getting your work out there, I think. But this could just be because you wrote it down and it's not the truth. So I take it back if that's the case.
I hear what you're saying, and part of me wishes I had an exact, articulate formula in how that came about. But everything they're both mentioned, which is perhaps, let me just start with the photographer themselves. Let's just go back to the beginning, where I believe as a photographer, or even as a creative, whatever art you're doing, sometimes there's a specific story that is calling out to you. I would advise you to start with that story and to follow that. I remember when I first got my camera years back in 1999, actually I borrowed it from my dad, it was a film camera. the first story I did was on contemporary dance because I was really interested in it. So I remember I used to walk and, you know, take a matatu and walk to the Go Down Center, and I used to just create this story for myself. So that's how I actually started learning photography. From somebody seeing the images, that's how it started.
Yeah.
But yeah, so because what I feel is when you're passionate about a topic, when your vision is clear, when you understand your integrity and what you're willing to do and go about to accomplish that story, when you're willing to be open and vulnerable, because let's face it, photography is it's one of the things you don't really talk about, but it's a very intimate, connective situation. If you're doing a long-term story, if it's sensitive, like maybe I've done a gender violence recovery kind of story, you're approaching the subject with a deep kind of sensitivity, with a deep kind of holding space. Yes, you're there to be objective, but yes, you're also there to be subjective. And I believe that's what makes the difference with some pictures you see where you just go. It's because the photographer was willing to go above and beyond and also deep within themselves to connect with the subject, to create a body of work, not just come in and rush out, but to really stay with it. And from that, slowly by slowly, people remember your images and they remember you. I remember it was a very funny story after a while. My parents, one time, my mother just said, I saw that picture and I knew it was you. And realize over time, because it does take time, over time you building your visual literacy language. Yes, it's going to unfold and develop over time. But, and also as both Edward and Jacques mentioned it, people begin to know, they begin to trust who you are as a photographer. They know if we commission so-and-so to go out into the field, they will take their time. They will do due diligence according to all the, I'm going to say, laws and ways of getting the picture. And slowly by slowly, that relationship is what sustains you. Like sometimes, and I know some photographers will say some of their clients have come back to them over and again over a span of more than 10 years. And it's because of how it started and how they followed through. And it's not just something you just do once. And even when we're talking about photography, it's not just photography, it is life. It is how you show up. It is knowing what your intentions are and getting clear with them. It is also calling yourself out on your biases, which Marda first mentioned when it first started, because sometimes those unconscious blind spots that we don't know about. And this is why I say that vulnerability and that sensitivity and that honesty should also be the same mirror that you apply to yourself. Now, it's not always clear, and it won't always be easy, and you will make mistakes. And this is now where I always tell people, you actually need to redefine your relationship to failure, because all in all, this collectively comes together and just creates the legacy of the mission and vision and purpose that you as a photographer stand for and show up for.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to direct this to Jack, Melda, and Edward, because you guys have done a lot more and they're still doing.
Before we jump to the next question, Stella, can I say a few more things on this? So on reaching out to international audiences or local audiences, I think both are very different things. Showing your work locally and showing your work in international platforms. So I want to start with the local. Locally, we know that we don't have many spaces in East Africa. We don't have that many galleries, that many newspapers that are craving for photojournalists to produce photojournalistic images. We know that we have that problem, but still, I think there are possible ways to reach to a local audience. So one can be partnering with local photographers that have similar works as you, as your work, and then showcasing your work in different spaces. And the second one, which I think is really important and makes especially the funding problem that we have so much easier, is partnering with institutions instead of sticking to your own personal box. For example, if your project focuses on historical issues, you can partner with the history department of the university or another institution that might be interested in your project. If you are working with architecture or with with different specifics like that, you can seek out institutions prior to your project or after you completed your project, so that you can also be able to secure some amount of funding. Because I think even if you have the gallery saying that they can show your work or they can give you the space to showcase your work, if you don't have the funding, then that's also another problem. And if that doesn't work, you can also find, I think photographers can also find just a public space. With CPE, we did one interesting project where we collaborated with architecture students to produce a certain work. But we did not exhibit it in a gallery, but we put it on a column of the National Theatre building, just out in the public space. So I think that's a very interesting direction. But at the same time, if you don't want to work in the galleries, or if you don't have the platforms like the publications or the online medias to publish your work, you can still find a way to use the public space in different parts of the city. And on the international audience, I think one important point that I would like to mention is for photographers not to miss out on opportunities. I've come through, I came across photographers who doesn't register for a certain portfolio review or a certain opportunity just because they think it's not on their level, you know what I mean. So I think it's becoming more and more an issue because I think it's becoming an issue here. So but what we don't know is that portfolio review might build our network and might connect us with somebody that knows somebody that can publish our works. So don't miss out on opportunities like that. But again, seek out platforms, seek out partnerships that are specifically interested in your work, and try to build your network. I think it's so much easier now than 10 or 20 years ago to build our networks, because there is Instagram and Facebook. So try to seek out if you are a photojournalist, for example, seek out photojournalists in different parts of Africa that usually shares information about opportunities in Africa, or that have the email address of some editors that you need to stay in contact with. So generally building your network is very, very important, I think.
I love the fact that you talked about taking opportunities, because we see that quite a lot, because we've been hosting a portfolio review for a couple of years now. And every time, initially we wanted it to be like a whole day, and then it ended up being half a day because people are not taking up the opportunity. So if you're out there and you are a photographer and they're not taking up the available opportunities that are still free to you right now, might be time to check yourself a little bit. Thank you so much for sharing that, Mahada, because that was very insightful. So I'm going to take us back a little bit. There was a lot of talk about security and safety from Edward and Jack. And one of the things that I know that the reasons that people give for parachute photographers is that, all these people will be able to showcase in a very some of the things that other people might not be able to show because they're scared for their lives and all of that. How do you respond to people who say that, and how, like, even with young photographers who are worried about security and safety of photojournalists, how do you respond to that? Hello.
But you want to go on?
So when we talk about safety, that brings the issue about self-censorship, really.
Yes.
And that's self-censorship is the decision to photograph or to publish the picture, not based on editorial concerns, but generally based on fear, as and photojournalists and journalists all over the world, and East Africa, even from my own experience and experience of some of my close friends, are always on the edge, when taking pictures, and the process of choosing to publish challenges. And it even results in a world being super fast, where news is breaking every second. So have to make decisions on when and how to publish pictures, even sometimes when they're still here. And so often the decision to publish or photograph not one safety net for every individual. And publishing or photographing a picture risks you going to jail, harassment, persecution, or even that. When the decision is between journalism and the kind of life, it makes it even more critical to make really very sound judgment. What you decide to do, so I can't really say they are path to follow when faced with these challenges as a photographer. However, key great people every such story to first of all your research. That's your first step. If you do your research on a subject, you know the limits of where you can spread the story and where you can go and you can't go. Take approach in terms of how you photograph, whether you're going to publish it or not. And so you're separating all the facts, or most of the facts, because it informs how you end up publishing this picture or you end up photographing. Because probably going to be weighing it against that. And also, I just talk about editors. From our experience, we have a very trustworthy editor, someone you can confide in, someone who will help you as you go about documenting the story, someone more experienced these matters. I remember 11 years ago, I was covering a protest and I was arrested. I was able to quickly my phone was confiscated, and I got a beating that I remember 11 years or so later. But my editor was able to call most of the radio stations that within a few minutes, my name was called General Sergeant. And having something confide with someone who can pull strings when you're in danger could also help. Most people ignore this, but it's also important to have a lawyer. It could be a friend, it could be actually a former lawyer, to just guide you on when possibilities of what could go wrong and how you can approach some of the stories or the pictures and percussions, just to guide you, especially if it is a sensitive subject. And this also helps you to know that I'm in a safe zone, I'm in a more dangerous zone. And legally, it's also good from a perspective of someone who is not directly involved in the story, but can advise you on how to go about it. And also having, avoiding routine. Avoiding routine when documenting a story that could endanger your life is, from my experience, has been, it's quite important. And 2 years ago, I was commissioned by the Wall Street Journal to do a story about North Korean relationship with Uganda. North Korea, as most of you might know, has a very tense relationship with major countries around the world, and especially the US. And yet the US, for the case of Uganda, is a major partner, is a major developmental partner. And so photographing areas where North Korea is involved within the country became extremely difficult, but the story had to go out. And so I remember avoiding routine of driving through the embassy because I was trying to photograph activity, who gets in out, who gets in, what kind of car came in, what kind of person came in, is there anything Ugandan related, maybe a car, maybe a person, somebody I know who might have come inside. And so I passed a lot around the embassy so much that I became scared. So what I did, I started going on borders. I started switching cars I drive to go through the area. I would sometimes, go walking. I would change my dress code in terms of my hairstyle, just so that you don't look like somebody who is, who is suspicious, and so on. And most importantly is life is priority. At the last point of this is life, really. Life is priority. And from my own experience, no story is more important than your life. So you have to weigh it against the repercussion of you either losing your life or publishing the story. If your life is in danger, just stop. Give it a rest. You'll resume it at a certain point. There's no point in endangering your life just because you want to publish a story. Like I'll always say, there will be a time and a date when such stories will be told. But your life is so important.
Yeah. Anyone else want to add to that? Okay.
Yes, Stella.
Yeah.
Okay. So I just want to say, I think Eduard covered it for the most part, but I just want to add a couple of pointers here, and specifically speak to those photographers who are not working for major news agencies, for like Reuters or AFP or organizations like that. So for those photographers, as far as security and safety is concerned, they need to know that what the other photojournalists go through to get the photographs, the images that we see online every day. It can be photographs that were taken in a war, or photographs of the COVID, for example, coverage of the COVID or coverage of the Ebola. So looking at those photographs, it may seem like, am I cutting up? Can you hear me, Stella?
Yes,
or is it
you're fine.
Okay.
No, you're perfectly fine.
I cannot trust the connection. So it may look so easy looking at it online, but one thing that I want to stress for many photographers working in East Africa that are not necessarily working with the news agencies is that many photojournalists that are involved in this environment, be it war or the pandemic, they are trained for it. They take the hostile environment training way before they are engaged in that environment, which basically trains them how to navigate their space while working or while taking photographs, right? So they need to be aware that, for example, photojournalists who are working in a war zone, they usually go with security who tells them what to do and what not to do. And photojournalists who are taking pictures of the pandemic, it may not always work, but they are usually equipped with full medical gear, and in some occasions even better than the doctors or the medical staff themselves. So they need to understand the situations and not be so brave that they are endangering their own lives. Yeah. Yes, I just wanted to make sure that that point is clear.
Okay, thank you so much, Maida. Now I'm going to go back to Barbara. So Barbara, what thing have you, right now, again, because of the talk about voices, local voices, giving people the opportunity to put local voices out there, how do you think, how can I put this? How can I put it? Sorry, I've lost my train of thought. What have you seen in the past that corporations have done? And I've seen a lot of things being put out there from corporations about what they want to do to extend a hand to foster this. What have you seen that corporations have done in the past, have done wrong in the past in the way they've tried to create diversity within these well-established and very exclusive clubs that they've created in the past, and what could you say could be done better right now? Your mic is still off, Barbara.
Oh, you got me now?
Yeah.
I am going to bring the conversation actually closer to home and talk about, because it starts within ourselves. We mentioned something about collectives. So let's start there. For me, I believe that's the ground level. I love it when I see people coming together, because it's inherently important as photographers, as creatives who want to come together and create. And I like it when I see associations and collectives formed. Nonetheless, sometimes there is no intention or mission statement and operating rules when people start. And sometimes their long-term vision is also not thought about in relation to the here and now. So those are just some of the things that I have seen arise. Another thing is sticking to one kind of a story and one kind of a style. Sometimes it's like, oh, this is the in story or the in range of this are the topics we need to focus on. And everybody does it in one way. And you start seeing, you just get fatigued because there seems to be a lack of diversity, or the way to push yourself to look at it in a different way sometimes is missing. So those are some of the issues I've seen. But as I've said, it can't be limited alone to corporations. It all also boils down to the individual photographer. So those are some of the things people need to take into context, and also to push themselves to be willing to look at mistakes and failure and to address those concerns. One of the things I was listening to something and somebody said, especially think about it, even here and now, look around you, get beyond, ask yourself, what do people need? What are they asking for? What are they looking for? You know, listen, don't just go out and just listen in your own circles. You even just been, I know there's social distancing, but how you work and relate with people, or you go your day by day, just listen, see, is there something I could do? Look at what's also culturally relevant, you know, because we're talking about creating an image of East Africa. And sometimes there are opinions or ideas out there and also within ourselves that people also have, and look at that and see, how can I approach this also as a learning mechanism for myself? Because also when I photograph, the camera also opening up yourself to learning something new. That's also really important. So that's the way I can approach what's been done in the past and also what's been done now. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you. Just gonna quickly say, guys, if you have any questions questions that you want to pose, because we're running down now. You have any questions that we haven't highlighted that you want to ask the panelists? Now would be the time to get your questions in. Although some were already sent through, and I think we've covered a lot more of it. Let me see. Oh, except there's one that someone asked. How can one sell their work through Getty and other online platforms? Anyone want to take that?
Can you repeat that?
How can one, a question that we received, how can one sell their work through Getty and other online platforms?
Get images or?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, this is the question I get most because
everyone seems to.
I got email recently, like someone was like, "Oh, hey, I want to use your images in my movie, but I found them very expensive on Get Images. How can I get them?" And that's also where something we didn't mention comes in: contract.
Yeah.
That's something we didn't talk about, and which is right.
Yeah.
At the end, you practice, you get a job, you do this, but you forget something: contract. And in a contract, when is the third part plays? Understanding contracts has been real also another issue. Like I can't talk about right now. I don't know if we have enough time. But yeah, back to the question, how can you sell your work online on other platforms? I'm not the person who recommends that a lot, to sell your work on this online stock imagely websites. My work ended up there because my contract with AFP or other agencies that have a contract with those imagery stocks. But normally I sell my work through my own website. People, reach out and, hey, Jack, I saw this work and I'd like to buy. But then also I sell through the center's website. Most of the ways to me I'd suggest for photographers to is not only to put your work on these stocks imagery online, but also reaching out to the audience you have. To me, again, like the work you do, you have a race to have either 3-5 people, that is your audience, which Edward also mentioned. You need this safety. Maybe you're not a lawyer, maybe you know this. Those are your clients first. Those are your first clients. But to me, how can you sell? If I go direct to the question, is there is so many ways you can sell. You can set up. There is on Weebly. You can set up your own stock. You can set up a cart in most of their online, which we can maybe send the links to those who wants to.
Yeah.
That's what I could say at the moment. Like my work, I never sold my work. Yes, Edward, I never sold my work online most. I think it comes from my network. I have not much to say. Sorry.
Edward, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on Jack's discussion. First talking about contracts, and just a brief one. Contracts are so important because they determine who owns the work, and you must be extremely alert on when you receive a contract. And I remember I stopped contributing for one of the leading media entities in the world just because of a contract. When I read through it properly, it stated in short, we take all the rights to the imagery, and literally all you have is nothing. Your creative aspect of it just goes to whoever is paying you that money at that moment. And so I was uncomfortable with it, and I raised the question that I don't think I'm happy with this. Can we co-share the rights, at least for a certain number of years? They were not willing to do so. And that's when I decided to just sort of stay away from most of the stringing jobs that I do for media houses, because you work so hard, you risk your life to document the stories, and then they own all the rights and they pay you literally a one-off fee for your pictures. And that's when I just literally stopped collaborating with most of the stringers. The other thing is about, wait, no, I think it just jumped. Okay, stocks. When I was beginning, I used to get so many requests of people that, oh, we have the stock agents, this stock website, can you contribute pictures in so that we can sell and get shares? Indeed, when I was just coming up almost 10 years ago, I was excited about these opportunities. So I joined as many stocks as possible. But to date, I don't think I can honestly point out to one stock website that has ever sold my pictures and actually given me any resource whatsoever. And I joined over 10 of them. And so I completely stopped. Anyone out there, I'll tell you, your best stock based on experience is your blog, is your website, is your Instagram page, is your Facebook page, how you organize yourself, how you publish your work on your pages, usually is the most important way of how you're going to earn a living. And so find a way of fixing your pages, find a way of branding yourself so well that people actually look out for you and give you commissioned work. In terms of depending on stocks, I haven't been successful in it. Maybe my colleagues here could talk about it. I would be very curious to know what the experience is like.
Sorry, unfortunately, we're running out of time and we have a few other questions. So guys, if you want to add any more to this, maybe just put it in chat real quick, because now someone has asked about how do you determine the price of your photography? So 2 questions have come in. How do you determine the price for your photography work, and how do you deal with plagiarism? Who wants to take the first and who wants to take the second? Real quick. I'm now doing like a little ping pong and trying to wrap this up. Yeah?
Yeah, let's talk about the price quick, because that's something else also we deal with a lot when it comes to having a gallery here at the center, because we also sell the work of photographers. And that's the first question they will ask you, like, so Jack, how much do you think I should sell my work?
Yeah.
To me, my artwork doesn't have any cost. You know? I can't tell you like this is my image cost, and this size, that's how much it costs. But of course, there is. We are living in a world where at the end you have to sell. You know, so it always comes to me. It always comes to, am I ready to sell these particular prints? Because every print I feel like I want to sell, it has connections to me. I don't sell all of my work. And from there, that's when I price from there. And my price always comes from either how much time did I spend on this particular project and how much is it going to support? Mostly always comes because my subjects are people, and those people and the stories and the time they share, they give to me, or the society I'm living in, always has to gain from what I'm doing. So, so I always put the price higher, so anyone around me can gain more than myself. And I always determine the price according to how many copies. That's, I think, something a lot of photographers has to understand. You have to have limited edition of copies you want to sell, because you can't duplicate like 1 million images and then say, oh, hey, this single print costs €1,000, you know? you have a recipe specific how many copies you want to give out there. And in those copies, how much would you really like get from out of it? Because someone will also come to you and say, I want to buy this image and I want the copyright for it. Or maybe I want this, you know, it's kind of royalties copyright at the other side for their company, you know, because they want to use this image. And how much money would you cost on that? Those are all details, and I can't tell you how much cost, but this is how I determine my price.
Yeah. Any parting words on plagiarism? Yes, Baba. Your microphone is muted.
I wanted to talk about pricing really quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah. First of all, there's different types of photography and different types of pricing. You could look at it. Some people take it from a time-based approach. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But most of the time, look at it as a value-based approach. For a service I provide, like portraiture, it has its categories and there's a price to each session, and from there you can pick on. But I think maybe we didn't answer that question on how to price, because when I actually first started photography, that was also one of the things I kept on thinking, how do I price my photography? I think at some level you need to know where you are as a photographer. You need to look at what's around you. Yeah, there's no sense in pricing yourself so extraordinarily high when the service you provide doesn't match that. Yeah, so this is now where I say it's always good to know who's in your area, have an open, honest discussion with them. Say, I'd like to know how you price your stuff, and also look at the products that they provide and take it from there. As you grow, as your work grows, of course, you can expound your prices according to your personal, how you look at everything personal. But another thing we didn't really mention, and I want everybody to take this with you, as a creative, as a photographer, please get right with your personal financial management. Seriously. Write a financial plan for yourself. The business of photography is real. You need to have your emergency fund. You need to have your savings. Savings, long-term, short-term. You need to have your health insurance. You need to have your investments. These are the financial skills we are not taught about. When you're doing your contracts and your model releases, there's a way you need to understand and speak the language. Edward said it's a priority. We need lawyers. You need a lawyer on board. If you're going to do a project, you need to have them on board. But yes, finances are very important. Start well, start right, and know it's just an ongoing journey, but please get your financial management right.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think we have run out of time. Just really quickly, someone asked, Mada, you had talked about books that you read. Could you like list a couple before we wrap up? Recommend. Yeah, you think about them, and maybe you can put them in the chat room while I ask.
Okay.
Anna, are you available? Sorry, I'm trying to wrap up here, and Anna was supposed to close us off. Hello, Anna.
Hi. Sorry, I'm just trying to start the video. Apparently very difficult. So yeah, I would like to thank all our lovely speakers today for really giving us some, I think, really great insight. Thank you so much. Stella, I'm going to mute you because I think it's, yeah. Thank you so much. It was really great. Thank you so much for British Council for partnering with us today. And big thank you to Stella as well for doing a really good job with preparing the discussion. And thank you to all of you who joined us today. I'm very happy to see quite a big numbers. And yeah, my name is Anna Kuchma. I'm the director of the Uganda Press Photo Award. And I hope to see you all soon. And I hope that soon we'll be also free to travel and we can really meet in person again, maybe in Kampala during our festival or exhibition or awards giving or some other place. Yeah, lovely to see you all and take care. Yeah, goodbye.
Thank you, Anna. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye,
Stella, you
everyone.
are muted. All right, goodbye.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, she's back.
Yeah, sorry. Thank you guys so much. I don't know, some people are asking about plagiarism, and I don't know if anyone, I don't know how to go about this because we are really out of time. But let's just end this for now, and I guess we can try to figure out a way on carrying that on after. Guys, thank you so much. And I will see about reaching out to some people who've been online so that we can see about getting some of this information.
And then also everyone else, I'll probably be reaching out to you individually, if that's okay.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And
That
then
would
you
be nice.
let me know. Jack, remember what you said about the women and photography?
Yeah.
I can help. I can come.
Yeah. Okay. We can continue this discussion offline, and then I'll reach out to everyone else. Thank you guys so much for your time. We have run out of time. This conversation always is very interesting. And thank you so much for agreeing to do this with us. And for those who were able to come in, thank you and have a good evening. Bye.
Bye.